Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I was rinsing plates when the line landed. Not shouted. Just tossed like a paper napkin across the room and left to sag where it fell. You still cling to your mommy. No smile to soften it. We were alone. The TV in the living room was murmuring about tomorrow's weather, and the pot I'd just scrubbed was draining upside down in the rack. My name is Noah Grant, 39, logistics manager out of Houston. Tuesday night, chicken and rice. Another ordinary evening that didn't look like a turning point until it was. I shut off the faucet and let the water bead on my hands. The cabinet door under the sink sticks if you pull it wrong. I've meant to sand the edge down. I thought about saying something measured, something that would land softer than the words I wanted to use. Instead, I dried my hands and asked if she wanted tea. She didn't answer. She was still half turned from the counter, staring at a point somewhere above my shoulder, like she'd rehearsed the sentence and was waiting for applause that didn't come. I talk to my mother on Sundays. 20 minutes, sometimes 30 if she's in a storytelling mood. My dad's been gone 2 years. She doesn't need much, just to check in about the garden, a reminder to schedule the car for service, a little structure in a week that got loose when the house got quiet. To me, it's maintenance. To her, it's comfort. It isn't clinging. Clinging looks like panic. These calls are the opposite. But I didn't offer a defense brief in my own kitchen. I let the sentence take up space, and I watched what it did to the room. She tossed her hair back and started packing the dishwasher. Silverware first, then plates, like always. Same motions, different energy. A small, satisfied curve at the corner of her mouth told me she thought she'd scored. I slid the sponge into the holder, set the kettle on the back burner, and felt something cool settle under my skin. The kettle clicked and thought about boiling. I kept my voice even. Asked about her day, how the project at work was going, whether she wanted me to look at the cabinet hinge this weekend. She answered in fragments. Nothing to hold on to. A series of shrugs stacked on top of one another. Then, casually, she repeated herself. Your mommy must love how you keep her on speed dial. Same word choice, same tone. Like she'd bought a new joke and was testing it under different lighting. I made the tea and didn't drink it. When she went upstairs, I took my mug into the office and woke my laptop. My inbox had an unread message from a recruiter I knew from a conference in Singapore 2 years back. Subject line, short deadline contract, premium comp. I told him I wasn't looking. I starred the email anyway and moved it into a folder named Later. I opened my passport drawer and checked the expiration date without thinking why. 2 years left. Fine. I closed the drawer and sat there listening to the air conditioner knock on and off like it was clearing its throat. In the mirror over my desk, I could see the hallway light puddled on the floorboards. We used to bump into each other there at night, two people reaching for water, laughing when our hands collided on the same glass. Lately the house had lanes, hers and mine. She'd started using the primary bath exclusively, and I drifted to the hallway one. Not a fight. Nothing declared. Just the slow migration of a couple who'd stopped sharing small things while still sleeping under the same roof. On Sunday after the cling comment, I called my mother at our usual time. We talked about tomatoes and the neighbor's dog, and whether she should replace the smoke detector in the hallway before it started chirping. I ordered one to her house while we were still on the phone. She asked if I was eating enough and told me she'd mailed a photograph she found of me at 12, holding a trophy for a science fair I barely remembered winning. When we hung up, I felt the same steady thing I always feel after those calls. A reminder that care is quiet and doesn't need an audience. Monday brought its own little test. She left her empty coffee cup on the counter with the wet ring underneath, like a watermark. Not the crime of the century, just a small dare. I wiped it up and made a note of the new rhythm in my head. She presses, I log. At work, I rebuilt a shipping schedule around a vendor delay and answered 3 escalations without raising my voice. The warehouse crew likes me because I don't bark and I don't bluff. At noon, the recruiter pinged again. Call if curious. I put my phone face down and finished my sandwich. That evening, she floated the line again with minor edits. You act like a boy who needs permission before he does anything. She was in the doorway, half in the kitchen and half in her phone. It wasn't about my mother anymore. It was about a new role she'd assigned me without asking me to audition. I rinsed the cutting board, slid it into the rack, and said, I'll take the trash out. She rolled her eyes like I'd missed the cue. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd refused it. Quiet strength doesn't always look like a pose. Sometimes it's just maintenance done without commentary. I tightened the loose handle on the back door with the small Phillips from the junk drawer. I marked a reminder to replace the AC filter and actually replaced it before the reminder fired. I cleared my browser tabs and archived a pile of receipts into labeled folders so clean an auditor would smile. Small order in small places. It's how you keep your footing when the ground starts to tilt. That night, I changed my phone settings. Do not disturb from 10 to 6. No favorites allowed through. If you want to talk to me when I'm awake. I downloaded an airline app one used to use when travel was frequent and then fell off. The blue one with the clean interface and the little crown beside first class like a joke. I didn't book anything. I just logged in and updated my profile. I checked the points balance and closed the app. In bed, she scrolled with the brightness too high and laughed at something in a group chat I wasn't part of. I asked what was funny. You wouldn't get it, she said, and turned the screen away. I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths. Somewhere between 30 and 40. I remembered my father saying a thing I hadn't thought about in a long time. You don't have to explain yourself when you're right. It's about not offering up your throat for free. By Wednesday, the sentence had become a shape in the room, her new accessory. She played with it the way people twirl keys in a lobby because they like the sound. I stopped reacting. Not compliance. Just a choice to let the words pass me and hit the wall behind me. You learn a lot about someone by how hard they push when you stop pushing back. That's how the first week went. No open arguments. Just a private jab that turned into a small routine, and a man who noticed the pattern and didn't move toward the fire. Nothing dramatic on paper. A pot, a drawer, a passport, a phone setting. Enough to mark the moment and to mark myself inside it. Something was off. A line had moved. I watched where it would go next. The next night the joke came back with a new wrapper. She put her mom and dad on speaker while she chopped vegetables. The phone balanced against the paper towel holder. I was at the sink rinsing a colander when I heard the setup in her voice. Light, sing-song, harmless if you didn't know where it was headed. Noah still does his Sunday calls, she said. He'd live at his mommy's if I let him. Her mother made that polite laugh people use when they don't want to pick a side. Her father didn't laugh at all. I set the colander down and let the water run. I could have walked out of the kitchen. I could have cut the speaker with one touch. Instead, I stacked plates and listened to the small echo from the tile. When the call ended, she wiped the knife and waited for me to take the bait. I just asked if her parents were good on their prescriptions and whether her dad still wanted help moving the mower. They're fine, she said, annoyed I hadn't saluted the joke. I took my tea into the office and opened the starred email I'd moved to later. The recruiter wrote like a man who had already booked the conference room. 3-month systems audit in Singapore, option to extend, housing provided near the river, comp stacked with a completion bonus. He asked if I had time for a quick call tonight your time. I looked back at the kitchen doorway. She was humming now, still victory lazy from her performance. I wrote yes and proposed 10. Then I turned on the desk lamp and made a list long enough to look like I was already gone. Passport scans, immunization card, NDA, employment history bullets, client references who wouldn't oversell me. I'm a logistics manager. I move things from where they are to where they should be, on paper first, then in the world. It felt natural to start with myself. At 9:30, she drifted into the doorway. You working late? I told her I had calls. She nodded like she'd expected as much and asked if my mommy would be okay with the light on this late. I looked up, met her eyes, and said, "What's going on?" For words, level as a bubble in a carpenter's vial. She blinked, thrown by the absence of heat. Nothing. You're too sensitive. Then she left before I could say anything she could twist into a scene. I let the silence settle where she'd been standing and turned back to my list. At 10, Singapore answered on the first ring. The recruiter introduced the client's operations lead, a woman who got to the point fast. Legacy inventory system in one plant, API mess in another. They needed a grown-up to map, sequence, and execute without babysitting. The 13-hour difference would mean nights for me and mornings for them until I landed. She asked if that was a problem. I glanced at the do not disturb schedule I'd set the night before, the one that let no one through after 10. Not a problem, I said. The call ended with a simple next step, papers incoming, review tonight, decide by Friday. I stared at the empty hallway and realized my body had already agreed. The house got louder the quieter I became. She started dropping little comments into ordinary moments. The way people toss coins into fountains to see if anything ripples. At breakfast, should we ask your mommy what cereal you should buy? In the car, text your mommy and tell her we'll be late. On Tuesday, she FaceTimed her mother from the couch and angled the camera so I floated in the background like a lamp. See, she said, he's always hovering. I walked past, kissed the top of her head, and went upstairs to pull our mortgage documents from the safe. I wasn't leaving a mess behind for anybody. Autopays got labeled. A new account got opened. My direct deposit instructions turned into a PDF sitting in my drafts, waiting for one click. Work noticed the shift too. I built a contingency schedule for my team that didn't need me to explain it twice. I handed the toughest vendor a roadmap packed so tight with dates, he didn't have room to bargain. I told my lead to start shadowing my calls, just to cross-train. He didn't ask why. The good ones never do. At lunch, I walked 3 blocks to my barber, cleared the back of my neck, and sat in the chair a little longer than usual. You'd be surprised how thin a man can make himself when he needs to slip out of a life quietly. Wednesday night, she tested volume. She repeated the line in the kitchen just loud enough for me to hear from the office, then again over the clatter of pans, then once more as she brushed her teeth with the bathroom door open. I logged each pass like it was a scan at a loading dock. After the third, I stood in the doorway and said, calm as ever, you don't need to use me as material. She shrugged. Don't act like a boy and I won't. I nodded once and went back to my desk. The recruiter's contract packet had landed. I printed it, signed the NDA, and watched my own name look different in fresh ink. By Thursday, the time zone was already living in the house with us. I took a call at 10, another at midnight, and one more at 5 in the morning with coffee and the blinds still closed. She came down in an oversized sweatshirt and scowled at the laptop glow. You're obsessed, she said. And then, like she couldn't help herself, maybe your mommy can help you with your little night job. I shut the laptop and poured another coffee. You don't have to respect what I do, I said, but you don't get to disrespect me while I do it. The sentence wasn't for her. It was for me, to hear my own boundary out loud. She rolled her eyes and went upstairs, and I reopened the laptop and finished the scope document. The cursor felt like a metronome. I'd match it until the work took me somewhere quieter. Friday's call was a formality. The client wanted me in 3 weeks. Housing near the river. Per diem that made me smile. Business class out, first class back if I hit their milestones. A driver would meet me. I said I'd confirm by Monday and muted the line while I watched the kettle boil. Somewhere upstairs, a drawer slid shut hard enough to make the wall answer. I poured the water, set the mug on a cork coaster, and felt the kind of patience you get when the result is already written and you're just waiting for the ink to dry. She announced dinner with friends for the following Saturday, her tone bright, as if brightness could erase the last few days. Everyone's excited, she said. Wear the blue shirt, the one your mommy likes. I said I'd be there. She smiled, satisfied to have an audience where the joke could finally bloom. I checked my calendar and blocked the hour before dinner for a call across the world. Not to be rude, to keep my clock aligned with the place that was about to matter. That week ended the way it had to. No shouting, just pressure applied to the same spot until the wood began to crease. She wanted an audience. I let her schedule one. I wanted a way out. I had it, signed and waiting. The house didn't feel like mine by then. It felt like a hallway I was passing through on my way to a gate with my name flickering above it. And the thing about pressure is simple. If you don't push back, it shows you exactly where the weak studs are. All I had to do was make sure I wasn't one of them. Saturday night was the stage she'd been building all week. Patio seating, string lights, 2 couples from her office, 1 from the gym. She booked the table, chose the spot by the heaters, told me to wear the blue shirt your mommy likes. I wore gray. The server poured around, and the small talk did what small talk does. Weather, traffic, the weird coffee shop that can't decide if it's a plant store. I listened, nodded, let the evening stack its plates. When her friend asked how our parents were doing, she rested her elbow on the table and smiled like a comic hitting her closing bit. He still clings to his mommy, she said, projecting just enough for the nearby table to hear. If she had a spare bedroom, he'd move in. Forks paused. A couple of their laughs came late, the kind people file under supportive. She waited for me to defend myself. This is where I was supposed to sputter, or joke back, or beg the room to see me correctly. I took a sip of water and set the glass down cleanly. Sure, the word went out flat, and came back heavier. Our server pivoted away mid-step. One of her friends glanced over my shoulder like there might be a better version of this conversation happening behind me. My wife blinked, a fraction too slow. She'd planned for protest, not acceptance. It's hard to keep a mask on when no one's pulling at it. The rest of dinner kept moving, but we were all eating around something sitting in the middle of the table. She tried to recover with a story about a co-worker's wedding disaster. I nodded at the right beats and let her have it. When the bill came, I handed over my card without comment and tipped like a man who won't be back. On the walk to the car, she tested concern. "Are you mad?" I unlocked the doors. No. It was true. Anger would have been warmer than what I felt. At home, she hovered in the doorway while I hung the jacket I'd worn for her night. "You embarrassed me," she said, which was almost funny if you squinted. I loosened my watch strap and looked up at her. "You did that." She waited for volume I didn't give her, then drifted off to brush her teeth too hard. When the house went quiet, I opened the laptop and signed what was waiting to be signed. The contract from Singapore, 3 months guaranteed at a rate worth more than our house on paper, with a completion bonus that made me sit back for a breath. Housing in a serviced apartment by the river, per diem that covered more than food, driver for the first 2 weeks, business out, first class return. I scanned my passport, attached the NDA, and hit send. On a separate tab, I removed an authorized user from 2 credit cards and capped the joint account at a number that covered exactly the bills with both our names on them. Not revenge, just an end to the confusion about who funds what when respect leaves the room. Sunday morning, while she slept late, I cleaned the coffee maker and scheduled a pickup for a small storage unit. Not for her things. For documents and gear I didn't want to think about sorting later. I moved quietly. I moved like a man doesn't need permission to leave a room he paid for. Midday, the operations lead in Singapore replied with a welcome packet and a sentence that made the clock inside my chest click forward. "Flights on us. Confirm preferred dates." I chose the soonest set that made sense. Monday, I'd sign the final page. Wednesday night, I'd be airborne. Friday, I'd be walking under a new heat that had nothing to do with arguments. She floated in and out of the kitchen like she felt a draft, but didn't know which window was open. "You working again tonight?" I told her yes without details. She tried the joke one more time, like a coin she couldn't stop testing for authenticity. "Maybe your mommy can help you pack." I wiped the counter and looked at her the way you look at a mirror when you've already decided you don't need it. "Sure," I said, and watched the word land again, dull and final. The next 2 days clicked into place. I moved direct deposit, separated subscriptions, labeled autopays so nothing fell while I was in the air. I didn't booby-trap the house or shut off lights she needed. I just stopped being the background system that hums so quietly you forget it's there. I sent my team the handover doc that had been living in drafts for months, the one with contingencies nested inside contingencies. They replied with thumbs up and a couple of safe travels I hadn't earned aloud. Good crews can read weather. On Wednesday, after dinner that tasted like waiting, I zipped a single suitcase, clothes that work, shoes that last, a folder with paper originals in case a network hiccup tried to make me small at a counter. I set my house keys on the tray by the door and took the spare off the ring. She was upstairs in a bath she didn't invite me to share. I wrote a line on a sticky note and stuck it under the spare, back later. Truth wasn't obligated to include her timeline. The airport felt like a place that had been expecting me. Security was math. The lounge was beige, quiet, and full of men practicing stillness. I sent my mother a short text I drafted 3 times and kept simple. "Work trip. Different time zone for a while. Call you Sunday your afternoon." She sent a heart and a sentence about the tomatoes finally coming in. I put my phone face down and listened to the boarding announcements move from other people's zones to mine. Seat 2, it took me in like it had a reservation under my name. A hot towel, a glass of water, the hum of a cabin that would be dark in 20 minutes. I stowed my bag and felt the weight in my shoulders drop a half inch. The flight attendant asked if I wanted anything before takeoff. "Sleep," I said, and we smiled because we both knew I'd get some and not enough. As the plane pushed back, I imagined the kitchen light at home and the way it pools on the floor. I pictured the drawer with the Phillips head, the hinge I'd tightened last week, the house that would keep breathing without me. Wheels up. Houston's grid fell away, neat and glowing. Then turned to black water, and then nothing at all. I turned my phone to airplane mode and watched the clock jump in my head. 13 hours ahead, give or take. My future already awake and making coffee while my past fumbled for its next joke. Somewhere over the Pacific, the cabin settled into the soft, anonymous hush I've always liked. No audience. Just men moving toward work they agreed to, on terms they set themselves. When I woke, the map showed our tiny airplane icon skating over a blue that could hide anything. I stretched, drank the water I'd left untouched, and felt that particular kind of relief that isn't joy and isn't triumph. It's cleaner. It's the feeling you get when you stop explaining and start acting. I didn't text her from the sky. There would be time for calls, and I knew when they came. They'd arrive at hours that made sense to her and not at all to me. That was fine. The time difference wasn't just math. It was a border, and I'd already crossed it. Consequences don't arrive like thunder, they hum. The house hums when autopay doesn't rescue it. Phones hum at the wrong hour. People hum with second-hand embarrassment when the story finally gets told straight. That's how the week unfolded after I answered her at that dinner and stopped being the soft place for her jokes to land. The first hum was financial. Autopay had always been invisible, a nice trick that made responsibility feel weightless. The morning after I landed in Singapore, my phone lit up with transatlantic texts stacked like dominoes. The Wi-Fi is out. Then, did you change the card? Then, this isn't funny. The card hadn't been changed. It was removed. From streaming, from utilities, from all the little comforts that only feel small until they stop. Boundaries aren't revenge, they're definitions. I told her at dinner that respect was the price of admission. The accounts simply caught up to my mouth. The second hum was social. Friends who laughed when she laughed stared at their plates when the bill hit the table, and she joked that I still cling to mommy. Somehow the punchline didn't land without me there to absorb it. Two separate people messaged me privately the next day. One wrote, "Didn't like that." The other wrote, "You didn't deserve that." The only audience I'm responsible to now is the man in the mirror brushing his teeth at 6 a.m. in a country 13 hours ahead. Time difference did its work too. Her calls came through at what would have been her late evening, my 4 a.m. A small storm against a sleeping window. At first I didn't pick up because I was asleep. The city outside was already awake at that hour anyway. Delivery bikes gliding under palm trees slick with last night's rain, the hawker stalls starting to heat walks, the MRT whispering along like a metronome. I let the phone hum on the nightstand and rolled back into the deep, honest silence that follows a decision you should have made months earlier. We had corporate housing near Tanjong Pagar, white sheets, a desk that faced floor-to-ceiling glass, the skyline marked by cranes busy at daylight and blinking red lines after dark. I signed the contract in a conference room where the air smelled like fresh coffee and dry erase ink. Pinned down, handshake, a number on the page that made the square footage of our house look small in my head. First class wasn't a flex. It was a feature of people who valued my time the way I always hoped a partner would. Funny how the boy who clings to mommy was apparently useful enough to build a rollout across 3 countries. She escalated like people do when the usual tools stop working. Guilt first. You humiliated me. Silence from me. Seduction next, which is just guilt with better lighting. A selfie from our bedroom. The shirt I used to buy on purpose because blue made her eyes look like a promise. We should talk. Then panic, the feral cousin of control. I can't cover everything this month. Boundaries again. I sent a single line. The mortgage and utilities are yours. The rest is already separate, and put the phone face down. When I finally did answer, it wasn't dramatic. It was 7:20 a.m. here, her late evening, and the city was just finishing its first rain. She didn't start with hello. You're acting like I'm the bad guy. I kept my voice level, the way I talk in a meeting when someone presents a forecast with wishful numbers. You mocked me alone, then in front of your parents, then in front of your friends while I was right there. You turned me into material. I gave you my answer. Now you get your bills. She went quiet, and I could hear the heat vent in our kitchen back home clicking as it cycled off. It was a joke. No, it was position. Jokes are what people say when they want violence without fingerprints. You earned the distance, and you earned the silence. I'm not punishing you. I'm leaving you to your choices. I didn't wait for the next line in her script. I said, "Take care," and ended the call. Panic mutated into blame. Screenshots from group chats were suddenly out of context. Her friends, those same friends, started pruning her performance reviews in real time. One unfollowed. Another texted me that she'd told them he's being dramatic about office travel, as if a 12-hour time shift is a mood, not physics. That same night, she posted a photo of takeout and captioned it with a quote about independence. Independence is beautiful, it just costs retail. I wish I could tell you I felt joy. I slept like a man who'd come home to himself and just happened to do it 9,500 miles away. Morning routines became light. Iron a shirt, skim the deck for the afternoon briefing, send a note to my attorney confirming receipt of the package he'd couriered to her address. Not the final one, just the outline, the careful inventory of what belonged to whom, the dates, the signatures needed. Paper has its own kind of gravity. You respect it, or it pins you. She tried one more angle, the sympathy story. I was joking because you're so attached to your mom. My mother doesn't need defense. She's a woman who beat cancer once and quieted a room exactly never. And when I told her I'd taken the Singapore contract, she said, "Go. Live like your work matters." I learned something in that. Both women had given me a direction. Only one was love. By day 10, the hum had spread. The landlord emailed both of us about a late fee. He kept it neutral, like a referee who's seen every flavor of breakup. I replied with a scan of the separation arrangement for bills we'd already agreed to during our last calm conversation, back when calm was still an option, and copied our attorney. She replied with 3 paragraphs about abandonment. The landlord answered with a single line, "Please resolve privately." That's how outsiders tell you they've understood the play. Meanwhile, work was clean. The team out here judged me by deliverables, not domestic weather. We hit our first milestone early, and the CFO shook my hand like a man who doesn't care about your personal life unless it interferes with the budget. It didn't. When I stepped back into the humid heat at lunch and ate chicken rice at a plastic table under a ceiling fan, I noticed the ordinary detail that marks the end of a storm. I could taste my food again. Night brought one last call I let through. Maybe it was mercy. Maybe I wanted a period at the end of a long, messy sentence. "Do you even miss me?" she asked. "I miss who I thought you were," I said. "I don't miss what you became to me." She told me she felt blindsided, that I should have fought for us. I told her I had fought for us, the boring way, for years. Bills paid, dates planned, patience extended, grace extended, benefit of the doubt extended until it frayed. You didn't want to fight. You wanted a performance. Another long quiet. Then what now? The truth, finally naked. Now you pay your bills. I do my work. Lawyers do theirs. I wished her well. I meant it. By the time I hung up, the rain had started again, tapping against the glass like fingers. I set an alarm for the morning, turned the phone to do not disturb, and watched the skyline breathe. Her game had collapsed under its own weight. The packet arrived on a Thursday afternoon, courier at the lobby desk with a clipboard and a polite nod that said he delivers endings all the time. My name on the envelope looked steadier than I felt. I took it upstairs, set it on the desk by the window, and watched the rain comb the city into clean lines. Singapore was a lesson in order, trains on time, elevators that never argue, contracts that say exactly what happens next. I slit the envelope, checked every page twice, and signed where my attorney had flagged in yellow. No speeches. I waited for her morning, which was my late night, and scheduled the courier back home for 10 a.m. sharp. I kept the note short. Receipt confirmed, timeline attached, division laid out the way we'd already sketched with counsel when conversation still pretended to be collaboration. House equity calculations. Her car, my accounts, the utilities she'd already discovered were real. I authorized my attorney to proceed whether she signed in a week or the court did it for her in 6. Respect doesn't haggle. The phone hummed on schedule. "We can talk," she wrote. "We should try counseling," she added an hour later, as if a room with a couch could rewind a public joke that had been rehearsed 3 times, alone, on speaker to her parents, and then with a full audience. My response fit on one screen. I wished her health and peace, confirmed the package was on the way, and told her any future contact should go through attorneys. I meant it. Silence between 2 people can be cruel. This one was clean. My mother called Sunday our time, her afternoon. I told her about the stall under the fan that serves it thick and sweet, about the woman who remembers my order after only 2 visits, about the way the cashier hands change like he's passing along a secret. I didn't mention the papers until she asked how I was sleeping. "Better," I said. I signed. She exhaled the old way, long, like she was cooling bread on a windowsill. Then you did the kind thing, she said. You told the truth. There's a kind of permission only a mother can give a grown man, and it has nothing to do with clinging. Work kept time like a drumline. We cleared the second milestone 2 days early. The operations lead stopped by my desk and said, almost offhand, "We're discussing an extension." When the CFO added numbers to that sentence, I said yes in less than a breath. First class wasn't a prize. It was the company's way of moving its people without breaking them. I smiled at the irony the universe kept handing me. The boy was traveling across continents while the woman who told the joke was discovering what bills weigh without a spotter. Back home, the text swerved. You blindsided me. No. I'd telegraphed my exit in simple sentences she mistook for empty air. We can be friends. That word again, always reaching for soft landings that still demand someone else's back. I gave her the only friendship I had left. A clear process, dates that don't move, signatures where they belong. She sent a photo of the dining room we chose together, captioned with nothing. I looked at the wood grain and remembered measuring tapes, arguments about chairs that felt like they were about something else. Memory isn't proof. Paper is. The courier confirmed delivery at 10:06 a.m. Her attorney acknowledged receipt at 12:41. At 1:15, my phone lit up with a call I let ring out. At 1:16, another. At 1:20, a voicemail that started with my name said hard and ended with the sound of a door closing somewhere I used to live. I set the phone face down and opened a new spreadsheet. The more complex the rollout became, the simpler my mind felt. I didn't mistake that for happiness. It was relief, the kind you get when your actions finally match your standards. A friend of hers messaged me a day later. I didn't know she'd said that stuff to her parents. "I'm sorry." I typed back, "No need," and deleted it before sending. Apologies landed in the wrong place don't cure anything. I archived the message and went for a run along the water. The skyline mirrored itself on the bay like a man finally recognizing his own face. Evenings were unglamorous in the way that heals. Laundry that dries fast in this climate. Calls that begin on time and end before dinner. A paperback I bought from a shop that still stamps the inside cover. I stopped checking who watched my stories and stopped posting them at all. The city's rhythm did the work a therapist might have assigned me. Sleep, lift, plan, deliver, eat, repeat. There's nothing masculine about pretending you don't need structure. There's something deeply masculine about building your own and living inside it without noise. When the sign page from her side finally returned, 2 weeks to the hour, I didn't throw a party. I opened the PDF, checked for the mark only a familiar hand can make, and forwarded it to the attorney with a single line, "Proceed." Later, a court clerk in a county I could still picture answered with a stamped decree that fit on one page. That's how 16 digits on a date line can close a chapter that once felt too big to lift. The ring had stopped leaving an indent on my finger weeks before. I took it off without ceremony and set it in a drawer I no longer use. She tried one last time to turn the ending into a scene. "You never fought for us," she wrote. The old fantasy. Conflict as proof of love. I thought of every quiet thing I'd carried without complaint. The logistics of 2 lives, the scheduling, the patience stretched and snapped back into place, the grace extended when it wasn't returned. Fighting is loud. Stewardship is heavy. I'd done the heavy thing until she made disrespect the house style. After that, there was nothing left to lift. The extension paperwork came through on a Wednesday, same as the first contract. I signed it at the same desk, same pen, a different man. I booked a trip for a long weekend on an island that looked like the postcard version of rest, and sent my mother a photo of the view from the pool because she likes water she doesn't have to get into. She replied with a photo of the tomato vines and a line that made me laugh out loud in an empty room. "You always did look better when the sun hit you a certain way." You can't cling to a woman who hands you courage with her morning coffee. I heard, secondhand, that she moved to a smaller place. That she told people I'd changed overseas. She isn't wrong. The boy who used to bridge every gap with silence found his feet and walked. The man who used to pay for comfort learned the hard math of dignity. If she needs me to be the villain to make the story round enough to hold, she can have that. I'll keep the truth. I never corrected the joke at that table. I never will. Sure was enough. It ended the performance and began the life that came after. Papers signed. Accounts separated. Door closed without a slam. Respect wasn't lost. It was reclaimed. Not loudly, just with signatures and sleep. On my last night before the project's next phase, I stood at the window while the city stitched itself into evening. I thought about the kitchen faucet that sticks, the Phillips in the junk drawer, the plate rings on the counter I used to wipe without comment. I pictured the man I used to be, tired, decent, soft on boundaries, and I thanked him for getting me this far. Then I thanked the man I've become for taking it from here. Respect is not negotiable. I refused to fight for a place where it was treated like it was. I chose to live where it's the cover charge. And now, when the world asks for my name, I give it without apology, Noah Grant. The rest can hum without me.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.